Is burnout a thing in your organization? If you and your team feel burned out at work, you're not alone. The questions, of course, are how can you tell and what can you as a manager do about it? Well, watch this video to find out what works. I'm Bob Wendover. Burnout. It's a term searched on millions of times per month by not just employers, but by the people working for them. Now, that said, it's become kind of a dirty word in the workplace. Employees don't want to admit that they're burned out for fear of maybe missing opportunities or looking bad in front of their coworkers or maybe even being pitied. Employers, on the other hand, are reluctant to admit that some of their employees might be experiencing burnout because people might assume that workplace demands are the source of the problem. So, how did we get here? From a broad perspective, it comes down to really three contributing and in some cases conflicting elements. First, there's the role that technology plays in our lives these days. Whether it's for work or personal endeavors, the natural urgency we feel because of the endless emails and texts and pop-ups and promotions, regardless of what we're doing, just adds to the daily stress because of always the feeling that we'll never be able to manage it all. Second, there's the transactional nature of our communication these days. Don't talk, text, don't call, email. Have a question? Discuss it with artificial intelligence or a bot. Is this more efficient? Well, supposedly, except that there are a lot of people who would argue the point. But the result of all of this is that the workplace has become increasingly devoid of the human interaction that we all crave as sources of support and empathy and friendships. And as a result, we've been seeing a marked increase in loneliness and depression and other mental health challenges both within the workplace and outside of it. Third, there's organizational churn. Now, I'm not talking about employee turnover here. That's generally a healthy phenomenon unless it begins to impede outcomes. I'm talking about constantly shifting priorities and ever-changing assignments and unreasonable demands on time and maybe even the feeling that leadership isn't quite sure they know what they're doing. For instance, when was the last time you wondered, what? When reading maybe some sort of poorly worded directive. As one person said to me at a seminar, I'm kind of living a life on my job of now what? And that doesn't foster very much of an atmosphere of trust, does it? Now, taken in context, is it any wonder that 3/4 of the workforce indicates they experience feelings of burnout at least a good portion of the time? Research conducted by the firm Censuswide shows that 66% of American employees are experiencing some sort of burnout during this present year of 2025. 24% say they are stressed because they have more work to complete than the time to do it. Another 24% say they don't have enough resources or maybe the right tools to do their job properly. 20% say that a poor economy is impacting their well-being at work, and 19% experience stress because they're just taking on too much work due to the labor shortages in their industry. In other words, this is a serious issue, even though we frankly sometimes sweep it under the rug. So, what does burnout look like in the workplace? As I mentioned at the beginning, no one stands on their desk and yells, "I'm burned out and I'm not going to take it anymore." In most cases, it's revealed in subtle changes in behavior. It's the person who begins to snap at coworkers. It's the extrovert who kind of becomes withdrawn. It's the person who makes sarcastic comments in meetings like, "Well, isn't this just wonderful?" In other cases, it manifests itself in physical symptoms, like the person who can't get rid of their head cold, or the person who dozes off at his desk, or the detail-oriented contributor who starts making silly mistakes. Now, for a more comprehensive but not complete list of symptoms, I've included a link in the description. What does burnout cost? Tens of billions of dollars nationwide, and hundreds of billions of dollars worldwide. And no, burnout is not just a U.S. phenomenon. Stanford University researchers have determined that workplace stress led to $190 billion in healthcare outlays just in the U.S. during 2018. The American Psychological Association found out that burned out employees are 2.6 times as likely to be seeking a new job and 63% more likely to take sick days. So whose fault is burnout? Well, we should all kind of look in the mirror, at least here in the U.S. Historically, our culture has been built on a philosophy of get stuff done and provide better service and improve efficiency, right? It's in the DNA of really any successful business. The problem with that is the fact that with the advent of digital technology and transactional communication and the organizational churn I mentioned before, those actually performing the work feel more and more like kind of cogs in a machine that they don't really understand. For years, in fact, I've been challenging those attending my presentations to go back to their place of work and simply ask 5 or 10 random people, so how does this place make money? And like them, you may be shocked if you do this at the answers or even the blank stares that you get in return. In fact, can you really answer the question yourself? As a result, even the most engaged contributors become detached because of the never-ending demands and unpredictable culture. Wouldn't you? They begin to draw back and experience physical symptoms and become cynical and frankly do the minimum out of a sense of self-preservation. But the vast majority are tied, some would say trapped, to the job that they're in right now until they can find what they believe is a better opportunity. So what are people who are dealing with burnout looking for? Well, empathy. Most people work hard, but they would sure appreciate some empathy and understanding, especially when life gets tough, which it does for everybody at times. And consistency. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'm happy to do it. But please don't change direction in the middle of the process, or worse still, abandon the project and make me think that all my effort was for nothing. Then there's insight. Explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. How does what I do contribute to the overall goal? And if you do, I might even have some suggestions on how to make it even better. And finally, encouragement. Compliment me when I do a good job. But don't just give me the generic pat on the back. Be specific in what you like and what I'm doing well. In fact, you don't even have to do it publicly, although sometimes I like that. As a manager or maybe a leader, how do you address workplace burnout? Begin by being more observant. Now, I know who's got the time to be more observant these days. But observing is not just something that takes time. It happens actually in the moment. People are saying and doing things all the time that might signal fatigue and overwhelm and frustration and confusion and other behaviors related to feelings of burnout. Now, in isolated situations, this is perfectly normal, right? But when you begin to see a pattern, it's time to investigate. And this doesn't mean that you walk up to somebody and say, "What's wrong?" Because if you do, you'll likely get, "Oh, nothing," as a response. Instead, you might try something like this. You might say to a person, I've noticed that you don't seem to be yourself lately. I'm concerned that maybe we're putting a little bit too much strain on you. Or something like that. It doesn't have to be that exact words. And then listen. If the person says, "Oh, nothing," let it hang out there for a moment or two. The nothing is kind of a reflexive action, isn't it? But after they've absorbed what you've asked or said, they might be more forthcoming. On the other hand, if they brush you off, reassure them that you're always willing to take time to work stuff through with them. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to become someone's personal counselor. But there's probably a dozen small adjustments you might be able to make about their schedules or expectations and so on that will help reduce the strain. Explain to them that if you don't know, you can't help. Speaking of adjustments, make these adjustments at the margins. Workplace burnout is not something you fix with a strategy. You can't announce an initiative. You don't need a budget. You don't call a meeting. What you do instead is flex with the immediate and individual needs as they come up. One manager I worked with had an employee who always seemed to be late to work and yet at the same time was upset about it. And when he approached her, he found out that her son's school started at the same time she was supposed to be at work every day. And she obviously couldn't be in two places at the same time, but had been frightened by an email from the HR department that they were going to start really focusing on getting everyone in on time. The manager explained to her that coming in 30 minutes late was acceptable in his mind, and he would cover that with HR and make that exception. After that, she settled in, a big worry having been relieved. As I said, a tremendous amount of overwhelm and burnout can be resolved by making adjustments just at the margins. Where might those adjustments be within your organization or team? Whether anyone wants to acknowledge it or not, workplace burnout is not going away. But simply observing and listening and making adjustments at the margins will go a long way toward easing these strains. How do you respond when you detect that one or more people on your team is suffering from burnout? I'd like to know. Put your ideas in the comments below. Got an issue you'd like me to address? Add that as well. And be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell so you'll be notified when I add more practical insights just like these. I'm Bob Wendover.